And we got back, and we were trying to hide to keep people from knowing it. Well, the next morning, I got a call from a dear friend of mine in Hodgenville. And she said, who was you with last night? Oh, my Lordy. It had already gotten out. It had already gotten out. But they didn't know exactly who I was with, did they?
No.
My name is Edwina Paris Rice Bennett Hutcherson. When I was born, they named me, I hate to say this, they named me Edwina Paris, after President Nagal of France. Gaulema. When I was in the 3rd grade, my mother said, now that's what it was on my birth certificate. My mother said, I'm tired of people calling you Gaulema. It sounds like gallstones. She said, I'm gonna send in and have your name changed to Jalema, which wasn't much better. But anyway, it was changed. So my name came out, Jalema Edwina Paris. I was born April the 20th, 1923. My parents were Jamie Harrison Paris, Gladys Cleo Ross Paris. I had one sister that was, she was about 2 years older than I. I had a brother. He was born way after we were.
My name's Eugene Hutcherson. I was born 10/14/26 in Buffalo, Kentucky. And my parents' name, Harry Hutcherson, and he was born in Buffalo, Kentucky. And his birthday, November 26, 1900. My mother's name, Ethel May Hutcherson, Schaffner Hutcherson, born May the 5th, 1905. I had 2 brothers and 4 sisters.
I grew up in Marion, Kentucky. We lived on East Depot Street, about a mile from downtown. And it was quite an interesting childhood there. We had a railroad station just about a couple blocks up from my house. And the hobos would get off of that train and they'd come down in our neighborhood to get something to eat. And my mother would not turn one of them down. And they'd come and knock on the door, and my sister and I was to watch. They'd sit on the whale top out there, and my sister and I were supposed to watch them while she went in and fixed their food. And she took it out and fed them all. Every one that came that I can remember. But what they would do is put their little sign out on our telephone pole. I think it was some kind of a check mark or something, so that when their friends come by, they would know where to stop.
My mother and dad, right after I was born, my mother had 2 half-brothers in Princeton, Illinois, and so they went up there and Dad picked corn. They stayed up there. Right after I was about 1.5 years old. Dad had this 25 Model A and drove it back home to my granddad's farm out here. There was a little 2-room house sitting out there that they had built, my granddad built, for us to live in. And it was in the back, past the spring branch, on a hill by the woods, where they wanted it up to the road. So all the neighbors through there were kin to each other. all the Hutchersons and the Spains, they was kin to each other. And they brought the mules and the horses and everything and hooked up to that house and put logs under it and drug across that spring branch. They had to cut some trees down, and I remember all that, and pull it up there. And that's where we lived at until I was about 10 years old. And Mom and Dad built a house South Buffalo. And then when I was 13 years old, they bought a house in Hodgenville, Maple Avenue. They lived there until I came out of the Army.
My mother, well, she was so much fun. Oh my goodness. She would set up little shows for us. And we would invite all the neighbor kids to the shows. And we'd do that for safety pins. That was a cost, was safety pins. So many safety pins to get into our show. And my mother, she had a broomstick, and she would be on one end and somebody else would be on the other end. And I'd get out there and turn flips on the broomstick. That was part of the show.
I made my own toys. You know these stilts you walk on? I made me a pair of them, but I'd walk on them stilts from where we lived at in that tent house up to my grandmother's. Then one time, I dug a hole and took a post and set it in the ground in the front yard of the old tent house, and put a 2x6 across it, and back then you didn't have a drill to drill a hole, and I took a bolt and burned it, got it real hot, red hot, and put it in there and burnt me a hole, and my sister get on one side, you know, it was about 10 foot long, get on one side and me and the other would go walk around.
My dad, he was an electrician. He started the broadcasting station there in Marion. Now, when I say a radio station, I don't mean a radio station like we have today. Our radio station was in a smokehouse at the back of the house. He turned that into a little radio station. Every Sunday afternoon, we would broadcast, and it would go all over Marion. And he would have singing and preaching and all, and we did that every Sunday afternoon.
There weren't no jobs. I mean, Dad raised a tobacco crop, him and Granddad, and sell it. Wouldn't get over $75 for a whole year, you know, a piece out of it. And one year they didn't get nothing. And there was no place over here at Hodgenville where Southern State's sitting at. There was an old tobacco warehouse there. They come down and buy you tobacco. And one year, they wouldn't buy you tobacco and didn't want to give me nothing for it. The people took it back home and burned it, the tobacco, and that building went down too.
My grandfather was superintendent of schools in Crittenden County. He lived on a farm and we lived in town. We would go out to the farm every Sunday afternoon after church. We all gathered. There would be, I'd say sometimes there would be 30 and 40 of us. And my grandmother would cook for all of us out at the house. Her brothers, their wives, their children. We would all eat together out in the yard. My sister and I, we had horses. My granddaddy gave her a horse named Old Colty and gave me a white horse named Old Ruby. And my sister and I, we would ride those horses every weekend when we go out there. We'd ride them out to what they call the Piney Fork Church. that was about 4 miles from my grandmother's. And we would ride those horses out there and ride to the store and buy candy. But those horses was considered ours. They wasn't really ours, but they was considered that's the ones we rode all the time. We had buggies. We had sheep shearing days. People in the community would bring their sheep, and they'd bring them there to my granddad's because he had a pretty big farm. And they'd bring them there to his house, and they would get out there in the lot and shear the sheep. It was a big day, a big day.
My dad and mother would move back and forth to Hodgsonville and then back to my granddad's place. They'd go someplace for stay about a year and then come back. And I didn't get a very good education. I went through the 6th grade. I didn't have opportunity. My parent was poor. My parent didn't have money to give me paper and pencil. In the wintertime, Miss Agnes Brown said, Eugene, if you come build a fire and have it warm when we all start coming in, said I'll give you a quarter every morning. So I did that, and she gave me the money, and I said, no, take it by asking me some paper and pencil.
I didn't graduate from Marion because I left there. I got married to my husband, and I left there, and I finished up at West Point, Kentucky. My first husband's name was Delmer Ray Rice. His dad died when he was 15 months old. His mother worked at a hotel there in Marion. She made pies, and she would go to work early in the morning, like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, make pies. He was by himself a whole lot. He decided his mother was having a hard time, and he quit school. He was in high school, but he quit school. And he stayed out for 2 or 3 years. And then when he came, now I didn't know him before, and when he came back to school, that's when I met him.
In Hodgsonville, all the farmers come in and bring the kids. The girls walking around on Saturday night. And even when I came into the Army, they were still doing it. But I was about 16, and it was Geneva and her sister, Catherine. They was walking around, and I walked up beside of Geneva and just took a hold of her arm and led her in front. She went right with me. I mean, it's kind of simple. And so we dated, and of course I had a car, and I would go down and pick her up, and we'd ride around and sit and watch other people on Saturday night and everything. It was amazing. Back then you could be 3 cars parked up in front of Morgan Markham's. Be 3 cars parked there. You could park and leave your key in it. When somebody wanted out, they move your car and put it. Try that today.
When he got out of school, he went to Fort Knox. He was a heavy equipment operator. His sister's husband was a heavy equipment operator at Fort Knox, and he taught Delmer how to be a heavy equipment operator. So he got a job at Fort Knox. We lived at West Point in a 3-room house. There was 5 of them. That was his sister and her husband. 5 of them lived in that 1 bedroom. We had the other bedroom. We had a kitchen. And she would get up one morning and cook breakfast. I'd get up the next morning We never had a word. We never had a crossword. And we did that for about 2 years. We had an old washing machine that sat on the back porch. They hauled water. We built a fire out in the back to get the water hot. Oh man, we lived with means, you know. And then after he got out of the Navy, well then we went back to West Point. When we was living at West Point, the soil conservation, Mr. Brewer, he was connected with all this soil conservation stuff. And so Delmer heard about that. He got in touch with him, and he was working for Mr. Brewer when we moved to Hodgsonville.
It was 19 of us from LaRue County went in January the 15th, 1945. But I think I'm the only one living out of the 19. After we got through with training, they sent us to Okinawa for lacing up them caves that the Japs was in. We're going, me and my buddy had a flamethrower. I carried the tripod, he was bigger than me. Always picked a buddy that was bigger than me. do the heavy work. But we had an interpreter to tell them to come out of the cave. If they didn't do it, we'd shoot that flamethrower in there. Some of them would come out and some wouldn't. And of course, we don't know, I don't think we knew if anybody died or not in there because I never did go in the cave. But the cave wasn't that big around. When the war was over, they put us on a ship and went to South Korea, Seoul, Korea. They told us on the ship, when we get there, the Japanese will be lined up and on both side of the street. They was presented arms. They had their arms up like that, presented. And well, my side of the street, he told me my side was the right side. My commander did. And said, you take every other one, or every third one, you know. I don't remember that exactly. But he said, don't walk up and just take it, you snatch it. And I had to snatch it. Then after we put them in a pickup truck, big dumpster truck, and stayed there at Seoul Korea for about 2 weeks, getting the Japs all cleared away. And then they sent me up on the 38th parallel. You know, that river divided south and north, Korea. Then on the bulletin board, I went out one day from the kitchen. On the bulletin board there, great big bulletin board, said, sign up for 3 years for the Caribbean Theater, or the European Theater one. For 3 years, you get to go home and get your muster out pay, $300. Either that, or be 3 years before we would be replaced in Korea. Well, I don't want to stay 3 years over there when I get to go someplace and get my money, must now pay $300. I came home, got married on my $300 and bought a bed and dresser and rented one room from a guy across the street from my dad on Maple Avenue and had 30-day leave. And then they sent me to Panama. Then I stayed there until November, it lasted November 1946. And put on a bulletin board there, the Congress had passed a law I could either get a discharge by signing up for 3 years, or I could be transferred to Fort Knox. I took my discharge because my wife was going to have a baby, Janet, and in January, not February. She had it February 1st. So I got home on December 12th, 1946.
We was living out on Olson Heights. And We was going to Pleasant Grove Church. But we was having training union lesson one night, and was having it open in the church. And he had a part. And he said, when he got up, he said, well, he said, someday I'm going to become a Christian. And Brother Willard, his wife, got up at the back of the church, and she said, let me tell you something, Delmer. If you wait until you know everything to become a Christian, you'll never be one. That changed him. Her words changed him. He came home that night. We sat down on the side of the bed. It was wonderful.
Geneva and I had 5 kids, 4 girls: Janet Hutcherson, Patricia Ann Hutcherson, and Maria Hutcherson, and Eugenia Hutcherson. Now Eugene, old man Dr. Hanley, Bill Hanley's daddy, named her. We had a boy picked out because I was sure it was going to be a boy. Well, she was a girl. He came out and said, Eugene got the 4th one. I said, we don't have a name. He named her Eugenia May. My name, Eugene, see, and Geneva's name was May, M-A-E. And so he named her. And then, well, Dr. Hanley couldn't deliver babies no more in 1955. So I met him over at E-Town at the hospital. He came out with Ronnie. He said, here's your son. So I named him Ronnie Eugene.
Our first church was Mount Tabor. We were there for about 3 years, I think. And let's see, our second church was down there at Linwood. It was our second church, Knox's Creek. It was only half-time when we went there, and Holly Grove was only half-time. They didn't have a pastor. So he pastored Knox's Creek half-time and Holly Grove the other 2 Sundays until Knox's Creek went full-time. And then we went full-time. And then we went to Kenmore. I believe it was Kenmore. Then we went to Fairview. So then we went to a church in Tennessee, Little West Fork. Now that's there at Fort Campbell. We were there 6 years, and we built the new church while we were there.
The first house I built was on Maple Avenue. Mr. Joe Arnder let me have the lot without any money. I went to see E. Shovner, and he had a lumber company right up there on Kirkpatrick Avenue. I went up there and I said, Mr. Arnders let me have a lot, no money until I get my GI loan. He said, I'll do the same thing with your lumber. Well, one other thing, I had to have something to eat while I was building, not working. So I went to Leonard Enlow, and I went down there. I said, Leonard, I'm going to build a house. I need credit for groceries until I get a GI loan. He said, you got it. And he even had a college guy that would deliver it to me. If people hadn't helped me, I couldn't get started. And I bought other lots the same way. Mr. Arnder had some more land there, and he let me have it the same way. 2 more lots, and I built 2 more houses, and no money. Pay when you can, and most time no interest. The first house I built in Hudson Heights is a stone house that Mr. Young lived in. And I laid Bedford stone, brick. I did everything, dig ditches. I did everything to the house. I only hired 1 or 2 men to help me on the house. I didn't have a crew. That's why I built that many houses. People trusted me, and I did do good work. I didn't cheat them, and I didn't hide nothing. I never did advertise in the paper. Never did have my name on the truck or nothing. I got ready to sell a house. It was $1 a year. And when I made money off the house and paid my debts off, you know, on the house and everything that I was building, if I had that money to buy tools with, I bought tools. You know, I built over 100 houses, and not any of them cheated me. My last house I built was out here, Hidden Creek. So the inspector came over, and he came in and inspected. Well, my kitchen, one of my plugs in the kitchen had to have a no fault. Well, I had a no fault there, but it was dark in there when I hooked it up, and I got my wire in the wrong place. He took it off to see, and he fixed it. I said, well, since you found a bad one this time, you think I should quit? He said, no, you're a good one.
Brother Willard's ministry, I think, had a lot to do. Oh my goodness, it had so much to do with Delmer's. Brother Willard just stayed with us all the way through, everywhere we went. He preached at Delmer's funeral.
When my wife got cancer, I took care of her for over 3 years. Most times she was bedbound in the hospital bed at home, and I quit work. 3 months before my wife, she never died. She told me, she said, I wish I could live long enough to find you a real good wife, because you're going to need somebody to help you to make it through. And I said, don't you think I'm smart enough? I got a first good wife. Why can't I find the second one?
After Delmer died, of course, I worked at the courthouse for 10 years in the circuit clerk's office, and worked with the judge in the courtroom. And I did that for 10 years, and I met this man. He was a deacon at Etna Grove Church down in Hart County. And I don't know, we got to going together. Well, he got sick and got in the hospital and had some severe problems. And I went up there to see him, and he asked me to marry him. We got married in the hospital. I brought him back here, and he lived, what was it, a year, three years? I can't remember all of it. But anyway, he was a good husband. And I've had 3 good husbands.
How many?
4.
4. I didn't know about that 4th one.
I met him through hospice. I worked for hospice for, I don't know, 3 years, I think it was. Now, I didn't work with the medical part. I worked with the bereavement part. And he was on my list to be one of my patients. Well, I debated about that because I had women most of the time, and I debated about taking a man, which only required calling him every week. I had to call him every week to see how he was, to see if he was on his medication, to see, well, just to see how he was. Well, the year, I worked with him for a whole year. I called him every Sunday night. But anyway, the time was coming to to a close. And So I called him and I told him, I said, Eugene, your year is up and you'll be going off my list and I'll be taking others. And he said, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I could just see his face. Don't know what in the world I'll do. I said, well, I'll tell you what. Would it help you if we went out to eat?
You said now my women patients, we go out and eat.
Yeah, told him, I said, if I have a woman patient, we go out and eat. But I said, I haven't had a man patient before.
I was first man patient,
But-
not last.
I said, would you like to go out and eat? He said, well, yeah, I'd like that. I said, well, what we'll need to do is go somewhere else. Because if we go somewhere here in Hodgsonville, everybody will know it before we do. So we've got to go somewhere else. So we drove to Campbellsville. And we got back, and we were trying to hide to keep people from knowing it. Glenn knew it, but we didn't tell nobody else. And we got back. Well, the next morning, I got a call from a dear friend of mine in Hodgsonville. And she said, who was you with last night? Oh, my Lordy. It had already gotten out. It had already gotten out. But they didn't know exactly who I was with, did they?
No.
Well, anyway, we got through that, and then we just, I don't know, we just started kind of dating.
It'd been way over a year since Geneva died, and I decided she wasn't coming back. And she told me to find a good wife, and it seemed like I'd found one.
Did we get married?
Well, we got papers to show June 17th, 1989. Well, I hope to be remembered to be an honest man, God-fearing man, and I think I have proven to a whole lot of people that I'm honest.
Well, I tell you, I hope people will remember me as a dedicated Christian. I want to be remembered as a helper to other people, that I've had something little to do with their life.